Have you ever wondered when is the best time to really move? Most people think the answer is something to do with the housing market. I don't. After helping homeowners across the Denver suburbs for more than 25 years, I've noticed something very different. The people who later find themselves saying, "I should have," usually ignored the signs long before they ever put the house on the market. Today, I'm going to share some of those signs, because once you know what to look for, you can't unsee them. The interesting thing is, none of these signs have anything to do with whether your house is worth more this year than it was last year, or what the market is doing. In fact, the very first sign usually catches people completely by surprise. The first sign. One of the biggest surprises I've seen over the years is the first sign usually has nothing to do with the house itself. It starts much earlier than that. It starts with how we think. The people who navigate this next chapter the best aren't necessarily the healthiest or even the wealthiest. They're the ones who make one simple mindset shift. They're the ones who stop asking, how do I stay exactly where I am? And start asking, what kind of life do I want next? Now, that may not sound like much, but I found it changes everything. Because once we start asking a different question, we stop looking at change as something to fear, and we start looking at it as something we can actually prepare for. We become more aware, more honest with ourselves, and more willing to look at our lives as they are today, instead of how they were 10 years ago. And again, that may not sound like much, but I found it changes everything. I was reminded of that by a woman who commented on one of my recent videos. She had lived for years on a beautiful rural property in British Columbia that she absolutely loved. But after her husband passed away, she made the difficult decision to leave that home and move into a smaller place in town. Not because she wanted less, but because she wanted something different. She wanted to be able to walk to the grocery store. She wanted a manageable garden instead of acreage. She wanted friends nearby, and when she eventually had a hip replacement, people could actually easily get to her. She even decided to give up driving because she no longer needed a car every day. And one line from her comment has really stayed with me. Life is smaller in scope, but very good. Now, to me, that's a mindset shift. She wasn't trying to recreate the life she had. She was intentionally building a life that fit who she was becoming. And that naturally leads to the second sign. Because once your thinking begins to change, you start looking at your surroundings differently. And not just the house, but the life you've built around it. And sometimes that's where the next signs begin to appear. I was reminded about this from a past client of mine. She and her widowed mother made the decision to leave the old family home in Littleton and move to a newer community in another state to be closer to family. But what made the move successful wasn't just being closer to the family. It was everything else that they gained. Healthcare was nearby. Shopping was convenient. Restaurants and everyday errands were just minutes away. And the community itself made it easier to stay active and connected. They didn't just choose a different house. They chose a lifestyle that fit the next chapter of their lives. And that's something I think we often overlook. When we're younger, it's easier to focus on the house itself. The kitchen, the yard, the garage, the views. But as we get older, the question quietly begins to change. Does this location still support the life I want to live? Can I get to my doctor easily? Can I walk or bike or get to the grocery store without every errand becoming a major trip? Can I still enjoy the things that brought me joy without spending half my day in the car? Those questions may seem small today, but over time, they often become just as important as the house itself. And then, almost without realizing it, there's another sign that begins to appear. Not in the neighborhood, but inside the house itself. Because sometimes it isn't the location that's asking more of us. It's the home that we've loved for years. And then there's the third sign. Sometimes it's the house itself. One question I like people to ask themselves is this: is your house still working for you, or are you working for your house? Those are two very different things. Maybe pulling out the lawnmower leaves your back sore for the next 2 days. Maybe cleaning the gutters now feels more like climbing Mount Everest than a Saturday afternoon project. I actually had an elderly client whose daughter called me one day in a tizzy because the mom had climbed up on the roof by herself. Now, let's say the daughter and I were both very ready for that adventure to come to an end. We laugh about it now, but it raises an important question. Just because you can still do something, does that mean that you should? That's a different question. Because every year I hear people say things like, well, the yard just isn't as much fun anymore, or the stairs feel a little harder, or I'm putting off repairs now because I know they're going to be expensive. I'm slowly closing off rooms because I really don't use them anymore. Now, those aren't signs of any kind of failure. They're simply signs that your home may be asking more from you than it used to. I'm curious, what's the one thing around your house that makes you think, I don't want to be doing this 5 years from now? I'd love to see your answer in the comments. I read every single one. Because sometimes the smartest move isn't finding a bigger house or even a smaller house. It's finding a home that supports the life you want to live today, instead of one that constantly reminds you of everything you still have to do. And that brings me to sign number 4, because sometimes the biggest challenge isn't your mindset or your location or even your house. It's the assumptions we make about the people we love. the fourth sign. That's the one that's about the stories we quietly tell ourselves about our future. Yeah, sometimes we assume, I'll always be able to manage this place. My health will probably always stay about the same. My kids will be nearby if I ever need them. I'll know when it's time to move. The truth is, none of us knows exactly what tomorrow will bring. That's why I think people who navigate this next chapter best aren't the ones who can predict the future. They're the ones who are prepared for more than one possibility, not because they're pessimistic, but because they're practical. They understand that life has a way of surprising all of us. And when we build flexibility into our plans, those surprises don't have to become a crisis. That's why I put together a short guide, questions to ask before you move. It covers some of the most important questions to ask yourself before you make a move, so you're not just guessing. I'll leave the link to it below in case you want it. You know, if there's one thing I hope you take away from today's video, it's this. The best time to move isn't found in a calendar. It's found in little signs life gives us along the way. And the sooner you recognize them, the more intentional you can be about writing the next chapter of your life. Hey, if we haven't met, my name's Peggy Dursthoff with Live Denver Suburbs, powered by HomeSmart. And I help homeowners in the Denver metro area make smart real estate decisions without pressure and without regret. And if one of the reasons you're thinking about moving is to be closer to family, I'd encourage you to watch this video next, because one of the biggest regrets I hear is nothing to do with the move itself. It's about the conversation family never had before the move happened. Just click here, and I'll see you in the next video.